Welcome back to another, I would say, service management leadership podcast, but we have interrupted those for the third annual Global ITAM Summit. And I have a great guest, Pam Fulmer, who's been on with us before. Pam, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you doing?
I am awesome. And Pam is a legal beacon for the software asset management area. I would say industry, but I think it's bigger than an industry. I think it's every company. And so it's great having you on, and I appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us.
Glad to be here.
All right. The same question that I open all of these with, because I think it's applicable. We don't see what good looks like in very many organizations. So what does good look like in your area?
Sure. So good would look like if software publishers for these, big enterprise software companies would actually behave themselves and only, ask for licensing fees for legitimate, over deployment, and not actually use their audit rights and their licenses to try to sell software by holding people over a barrel with these predatory audits. So good would be if you overuse the software and you really commit legitimate copyright infringement, you pay for that. But it would also mean that you don't have some of these overreaching, overbearing, predatory software publishers concocting these huge compliance gaps that have no basis in reality in order to scare companies into buying software.
Submission.
And it's not good. It hurts the economy. These costs are just passed on, and ultimately it's the consumer that pays the price.
Yeah, they beat them into submission sometimes. And
they try, and that's what I try to do is help them. Companies have weapons in their arsenal, and they have defenses, and they should not allow themselves to be bullied into purchases of software that they don't want or need. And they should figure out their compliance position, and make sure that they're in compliance, and then maybe they don't get themselves this opening, to take a small compliance gap and actually make it like it's this huge compliance gap when it's not.
And I think you touched on something that's very applicable. If you as an organization don't know your license position, you are at risk for being caught off guard on everything, because now if the publisher is predatory, everything's on the table because they know that you don't know.
That is so true, Jeffrey. And so too many companies are kind of pennywise and pound foolish. I mean, if I ran my own like big company, I can guarantee you that I would go out and I would hire some of these expert consultants out there that will come in and look at my compliance position. And that's not so much what the lawyers, do, as much as it is, lawyers do look at it, but also go in, find out what you're using. And then, of course, the legal part is look at what your contract allows you to use. And then if there are issues, then, fix them, get it remediated. And then when the inevitable audit comes, you're going to be in a much better position. And, the way it's set up with some of these publishers, and the contract kind of recognize it, that there's going to be some non-compliance. And so there's just a true up,
Right.
But you want it to be like a legitimate true up and not, something that's been completely concocted. So I've been doing this for years, and I have never yet had a client. And if a client did say this, I would run the other way. I've
Right.
never had a client say, I want to really rip off Oracle and use all this software without paying for it. They
Right.
say the opposite. They say, if I over deployed, if I use it and I wasn't supposed to, then I want to pay for that. That's only right. But I don't want to be held hostage and forced into a cloud purchase, or
Yeah.
be taken advantage of some other way.
I'm right there with you. And I want to take this a step further. When you talk about hiring these experts, many of them cost, and you think your renewals, your audits, they cost like 1% of your total expense for that software. And when you look at it in that perspective, it looks like it's an easy adoption for the people. You know, you have Microsoft that costs you $250,000 a year. You know, is it worth a few thousand just to make sure your stuff's good? But most people pay Microsoft 25 million, or you know, these big organizations. So is it worth
Sure.
25,000 just to make sure that you're good? You know what I'm saying? Like, I just don't
Exactly.
understand.
Yeah, it's penny wise and pound foolish. And you know what I find, because often what will happen is the legal department at a company won't even know there is an audit going on. Okay. And so it's only when the final audit report drops and it's some like $20 million nightmare figure that it ends up on their desk. And they're, like, what do I do? And then of course it is more of an investment to figure out, what the true position is and how to get out from under it. But definitely I would say, and the other thing that happens is when I get brought in by the legal department, I will say, I want to hire an expert consultant, because the expert consultant will be able to like review the technical data and kind of tell me, is this real or is this not real? What is that? I can't do that as a lawyer.
Right.
And so the legal department, the in-house lawyer often will say, no, my guys are really good. Okay, they really know what they're doing. And I'm like, oh, because I'm sure that they're great and that they're really knowledgeable, but you don't bring, what is it? You don't bring a butter knife to a knife fight or something
Right.
like that. And so you really do need to have these people that just have this constantly, they're reviewing for compliance, and they know the technology. They've seen, 150 audits, so they know what they can get away with. They know what they can say. Hey, can we just sign like a declaration that this was inadvertent use and we won't do it in the future? They know all the tricks of the trade, where if you just rely on your internal people, you know they don't have that background. And then plus they're worried that they could lose their jobs
Right.
sometimes, because when a big software publisher comes in and says you have a $20 million compliance gap, and it's completely exaggerated, the company doesn't realize that at that point. And so everybody in management is looking at the CTO and saying, or the CIO, well, how did this happen? And so you really do need that expert help, and to figure out what's true and what's false, what's real and what's not, and then get that number down, the number that's truly owed, and not this crazy number that is just has no basis in reality.
Sticker shock. And so two things you said there that I want to push in on. One other reason you don't want to use your internal people, because they're part of the reason you're in this position.
Right.
So going back to them doesn't really help you, because if they could have solved it, they would have already solved it.
Right.
And but second, you mentioned about bringing people in early. Is that one of the steps that you would use to like become good if you're an internal company, is bring in experts, legal and specific publisher experts to the table early?
Absolutely. So for example, if I'm retained and I can bring on board my expert when the audit's just starting out, before any data has been shared, oftentimes the software publisher won't even know that I'm involved, because it'll go so smoothly. We don't have to escalate it to the legal department at the software publisher. We just work with the client, figure out what information is relevant, what really do they owe them. And then by the time the final report drops, it does always, it's never accurate,
Right.
but it's not, it's not a $30 million problem. It's something more, in the realm of possibility. And then we chip away on that. If people wait until the audit report drops, then, I get brought in and people are in panic mode. And so I spend the first part of, literally, I can't tell you, okay, how often this happens. The first phone call where the client is shell shocked. they're just, they just can't believe it. And I say, yeah, I know. This is how people feel. And they say, I can't believe that fill in the blank company, who is supposed to be our business partner would actually do this to us. It's so unprofessional. I feel like I'm being extorted into a purchase. And I actually have to kind of talk to them and say, I know how you feel. Everybody feels that way. And so now what we have to do is we have to start pushing back. And it's almost like you have to rally them,
Right.
and because at that point I don't know what the true compliance gap is, but I can guarantee them it's going to be less than what the software publisher is saying. And so we'll just have to find out what that is and then negotiate, because it's all about negotiation, to come to the number that will work for both sides.
And you almost become their Hail Mary, to use a football term, right? Like,
Yeah.
that we're in this bad spot. Let's just hope and that Pam can pull us back out. Whereas you can be a lot more effective if brought in early. And I think that maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but your margin of effectiveness is greater the earlier you're brought on, because you
Yeah,
can
and
control more
cheaper.
outcomes
And cheaper,
and cheaper.
because you control the record that you're making, and then it's not all a big mess at the end that has to be cleaned up. It's actually, it's reasonable, it's logical, it's out there kind of perfectly laid out, versus what happens maybe before we get involved, where Oracle or whatever software publisher is like, we need this information, we need it now. Then what I see happen is these IT people, they become panicked and they don't respond. And then so Oracle and these other publishers are really good at following up and saying, we've been wanting to, this has been going on for this long and blah, blah, blah. And it just creates a terrible record, so that if you would end up in court, it looks like the company is on the wrong side, because they've been avoiding, these conversations. So the worst thing to do is stick your head in the sand and hope it all goes away, because it's not going to go away. It's just not. And so you need to kind of face it head on. And but I've just never seen it be as bad as it seems, when I get brought in late in the game. It's always better.
I understand. That's why I use the Hail Mary reference, right? Like,
Right.
we don't have any other options, so let's just hope. So disruption is coming, I think, in this industry. I think that we're at a crossroads that we haven't been before. What disruption do you see in this industry? I think you could take this question a few different ways.
Sure. So and this is something that I mentioned on our larger podcast a few weeks ago. I do think that because what the software publishers are doing is so outrageous, that eventually you're going to see some regulation in this area. And I think that, when it comes to cloud, for example, there could be very well be antitrust issues where companies try to get you into their cloud, and then after they get you in, they impose policies and other things that like keeps you paying them instead of maybe going out to some other publisher to get, kind of aftermarket type things from them. So I think you're going to see that. And but in order for that to happen, companies have to actually come forward and say, look, this is my experience. Oracle did this to me. And and it should stop. And they need to come forward, but they're so afraid that if they come forward, the software publisher is going to extract vengeance on them. And so, once somebody is done with the audit, they're like, why the heck would I go out there and, become a target? Well, the reason why you do is because it's only going to change when people start talking about it. Because I can tell you, and the thing that's just so difficult to see sometimes when I am looking at legal cases, is that judges, on first blush, when they get these cases, these are major names, and they just can't believe that these major, highly respectable US companies would actually be doing these nefarious things. And so, and the reason why is because people that this happens to, they're not talking about it.
Right.
And the other thing is that the software companies that are doing it, for the most part, are really good at keeping people from running out and filing lawsuits where it all gets out in the public domain. So they've been very good at figuring out how far they can press them. And then, and then when it looks like it's going to be a lawsuit, then they pivot away and it goes away. And so, but when these companies start testifying on Capitol Hill and saying this is
wow.
what happened, when they start banding together, that's when it's going to change. And there are groups now. It's starting more in Europe, but it's going to come to the United States. And they're gonna. I really do believe that people are going to say enough is enough.
I think that's coming, and I think that especially as they're being forced into cloud, right? The mantra has been, we found all this stuff on your on-prem, but we'll let you off the hook if you go to our cloud and sign your life away for, a million years at this exorbitant price. And that's so predatory.
Right. And the other thing is that once you're in their cloud, and I do hear people so far saying, well, so far it hasn't been some of the other tactics that we've experienced, but I'm seeing more and more. And they can just flip the switch.
Yes.
See, before, when you had your software on premises, people would say, clients would say, well, what if I get a termination notice? And then I would say, well, then we need to run off to court and file an action and try to get a declaration that you're not in breach and you can keep using the software. But at least the software was on premises, so they could keep using it while they ran off to court. And then if they were wrong, then of course they could be liable for committing a copyright infringement. But if they were right, their business doesn't just stop and they can continue on. But now with the cloud, you're going to get this notice and the company can just switch it off. And so I think you're going to see real hardball, 30-day notices to cure, or we're going to terminate. And then, look out if they do that. And I'm hoping that they'll be more careful because they know how bad that could be. But some of them, I think they'll do it. And they're certainly using it as leverage in negotiations. Companies are thinking that they're going to terminate the license. So it's really, I think it's going to get even more hardball unless people talk about it and get it out there and make sure it doesn't happen.
It's something that's coming. I think that is coming. Like, it's gonna, as the old people, my parents would say, it's coming to a head soon, right? Like it's festering, it's gonna come to a head soon. And I remember Craig on the summit last year talking about Craig Garrenti, who's very sharp on the Oracle stuff for the audience, Craig, talking about how everybody talks about, hey, now you have flexibility because you can use all these, but no, you're being trapped into one publisher because Oracle, for example, isn't going to really be happy with you taking their cloud and using it on an AWS. So they're going to try to maneuver you or leverage you as much as possible into having fewer and fewer choices.
Right. And that's why we have to really be looking for these, well, I think are antitrust issues. Yes. And ringing the bell on Capitol Hill about what is going on. And the focus has been on, as it should be, on like a lot of the use of data and what are big tech companies doing with data and how to protect consumers. And that's all true and it's good and we should continue. But American businesses, actually businesses all over the world, are getting raped and pillaged by these software publishers. And it's time that it stops. And I'm really looking forward to working with hopefully there will be companies that will come forward and and say, this happened and no mas, we're not going to put up with it anymore. And then
Enough
it'll
is
get
enough.
better.
Enough is enough, right?
Is enough. Yeah.
All right. So we appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us, Pam. Do you have any parting words that you would like to bestow upon us?
I would just say that one organization, and let me just make sure I have the right website. One organization, if you've been treated unfairly in an audit, if you've bought software that you didn't really want because of an audit, and you feel that you were extorted, or that that what happened to you was unfair, there's an organization that you may want to look up. It's called fairsoftware.cloud. And they're working to kind of get companies that may have had your experience together to come out from under the rocks and to talk about their experience, so that we can stop all this from happening. And then, of course, we help clients, whether or not it's at the beginning of an audit, or even before the audit starts, or after the report drops. We help clients negotiate an exit strategy where if they owe money, they will pay what they owe, but they're not going to pay more than they owe. And so that's important. And I'm, at tacticallawgroup.com.
Gotcha. And so you have all this wisdom, and I think that even if it goes to antitrust, there will always be need for your specialty in this field. You know what I mean? Like renewals, audits, they're never going away. But
Right.
you're right, some type of guardrails do need to be in place.
Right. Well, and the other thing is, what our firm does is we don't just handle software audits. We handle licensing disputes and breaches of contracts. So if you're an Oracle partner and you feel like you've been treated unfairly by Oracle, even if it doesn't relate to an audit, we might be able to help you resolve that. So what we handle is, disputes that involve software licenses, and we help resolve the disputes. And most often we don't have to file litigation to do it. But if someone's being unreasonable, we can do that to try to resolve the problem. So yeah, so this is an area that it's only going to grow, because software is really important for our economy, and it's only going to get more important in the future, not less.
Oh yeah, every company is a technology company, is what I like to say, because
That's
it's
so true.
every bank is a technology company. So Pam is easy to find on LinkedIn. You can find her at Tactical Law in California. And anything else that would help people find you, or see what your company provides?
I would just say, go to our website, tacticallawgroup.com. And like you said, also look for me on LinkedIn. I have a blog that I'm pretty active on, and it's getting a lot of attention. I'm actually getting phone calls from all over the world, actually. People are very interested in the blog. So read it. Hopefully you'll find something, some kernel that will help you in your situation. And I'm always here to talk, so that I can help you figure out if I am someone that could help you with whatever your particular licensing situation is.
That is awesome. Pam, thank you for joining us. And everybody reach out to Pam if she and her services can be useful to your organization. Thank you, Pam, for spending your time with us.
My pleasure, Jeffrey. Thanks for having me.
Have a great day.
You
Bye.
too. Bye.